Nagbabalik po tayo dito sa Usapang Bayan at kasama pa rin natin ang Vice President and General Counsel ng GOACT. Attorney Rod, yung pinag-uusapan ho natin kanina, no? Ano ho yung masasabi nyo tungkol doon?
No, in fact, George, I was going to say that that's a very good illustration of really the whimsical practices of the PNP under previous leadership. As you said, once you took off your police uniform, you're considered a civilian for purposes of carrying firearms, which really put them at a disadvantage. Now, under General De La Rosa, there's a, I don't know what they call it, memorandum circular requiring police officers to carry their firearms on or off duty, in uniform or not. Because after all, they are law enforcement officers.
Precisely.
Yes.
So they should be able to respond anywhere, anytime. And so, in other words, that's a good development. But why this, our point is, why this step to depend on the leadership? It should be an institutional thing, that kind of thinking.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that the people who sometimes come up with these very difficult regulations is that as police officers, they might feel that they have some degree of leverage in terms of getting getting away with carrying guns, whether they get a license or not. But they have to remember that retirement age for government personnel, particularly those in uniform, is 55.
Correct.
So by the time they reach 56, they're going to be like civilians like us, no? So whatever it is that they're requiring upon civilians will be required upon themselves at that time that they retire.
And if George, if you have this wishy-washy kind of policy with the police, they really encourage lawlessness. If that's the case, sometimes you can carry, sometimes you cannot. They should be clear about it and be consistent with the law. That's all we're saying. In other words, again, we're not asking for a favor from them. We're saying that we should be allowed to exercise our right. That's all there is to it.
Attorney, as Sir George mentioned earlier, there are so many unlicensed guns and loose firearms in the country.
Correct.
What does GOACT do to address this matter?
Well, of course, on the one hand, we are not a law enforcement agency. We don't really have the power, the authority. That said, we really, as we said, propagate the gospel, so to speak, encouraging people to license their firearms, and we ban anyone who has an unlicensed firearm from joining us. And if and when possible, we report them to the authorities if we have knowledge.
How does one become a member of GOACT?
You can sign up in our website. It's not a problem. No fees involved.
And then do you get like a card or something that will...
Yeah, you get a card.
Okay, so Rich and I will have to sign up
Yes.
on that.
Sure, you're most welcome. I'd love to have you on board.
How else can one protect themselves without the use and without carrying a gun?
Actually, Rachel, as what I was saying earlier, that's part of our advocacy. Beyond firearms, a firearm is just a tool. If you don't have the proper mindset to use it, it's useless. So you should be aware of your surroundings, aware of your community, set up your house and your neighborhood in a way that is conducive to keeping out bad elements. And that's what we're trying to advocate also at the barangay level.
Maybe Rod, at this point, I think it's about time that we revisit a little bit of history, no?
Yes.
From what I remember, most of Asia during World War II
Correct.
was really under different foreign powers or under their own governments, but they were really under dictatorship or something like that. And the general civilian population was generally unarmed.
Correct.
Because firearms were confiscated from them,
Correct.
or their colonial masters deemed that it would not be wise to have their subjects have the facility or means to revolt against them.
Correct.
Which is why when the Japanese rolled over the Pacific, I think it was a very quick spiel. No, I mean they ended up being able to subjugate the whole mass of Asia in a matter of months.
George, I'll give you an example. It's good you raised that. Remember when Manila was declared an open city, when the Japanese first arrived at the outskirts? The Manila Police Department, WPD, ordered their officers to keep their firearms in a lock container so that there'd be no misunderstanding with the Japanese. And you know what happened? There was widespread looting and crime by the civilian populace because the law enforcement people were unarmed. And as you said, most civilians were not armed either.
No, I think we can also learn from history that most oppressive governments tend to disarm their population first.
Correct.
Before being able to carry out their, I guess, evil intent, no?
Germany, best example.
Well, I guess, without naming specific countries, no? But what is your opinion on that? In our case, particularly in the case that we all know that our armed forces and police is not sufficient in terms of number to really, let's say, take care of an invasion or anything like that. And you know, we have 105 million Filipinos that can be augmented to support our men in uniform, no? So why do you think the government is not tapping that unused potential of having the million or so legally licensed firearms be able to be deployed by people who are who can use them properly, so that just in case something bad happens, then we would have the ability to at least defend ourselves when they come onto our shores?
Well, George, you know, I see two things there. No? First is the institutional mindset of the government and the police that, you know, owning a firearm is a privilege, and they should be the only ones to have the privilege, which is wrong. And also on a cultural level, you have this taboo that, you know, gun ownership by civilians, you're a troublemaker, the kind of thing. That needs to be changed. I'll tell you, George, in Lee Kuan Yew's book, the late Lee Kuan Yew, Singapore, he said that when they first set up Singapore, the first thing he did was insist that all of the civilian populace be trained in firearms. And he said what he wanted, because they were small, Singapore, he wanted to make sure that if anyone invaded, they would know that there'd be a firearm in each house ready to take them on. That's the way it should be. That's the kind of mindset we should have. Israel, every civilian there is part of the reserve army. You know, George, we used to have the ROTC. We went through that.
And even that was scrapped.
That was scrapped. You know, it's we're turning our young people into softies now.
Well, actually, another good example of mandatory military service or mandatory firearms ownership is Switzerland.
Correct.
And they were able to maintain their neutrality
Correct.
Throughout World War II, largely because they had the population to back them up.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. In the end, it's your country. You have to look out for it. You know?
So is there something that as part of Go Act we can try to open the eyes of government into this reality?
Well, that's why we've been advocating with Congress, advocating in media to change, so that society can change its mindset and its view towards these things. Because once you have recognition of these realities, then I think change can come.
Okay.
Sir, I would just want to go back a little bit. No? You mentioned earlier that your license can be revoked. Can you still apply for a new one?
Well, actually, that's part of what we question in the Supreme Court. If you have been, I think if you have been convicted in a court of law for a crime, well, it can be revoked, and you're disqualified forever. That's fair. But there's a provision in the law that says the PNP chief can revoke it any time, which is not fair. And we've challenged that in the Supreme Court. It's pending right now. And in other words, your license, being a right, should not be at the whim of the executive. It's there in the law that has to be respected.
So what are your current pending advocacies right now, or what are the pending issues you have with the courts?
Well, we have challenged RA 10591.
What portion of it were you challenging?
Well, for example, George, there's a provision there that says that if you've been charged with a crime, you're disqualified from owning a firearm, which doesn't make sense. As I said, if you use your firearm in self-defense, you will be charged. Does it mean, therefore, you lose all your firearms? It's irrational and it's unfair.
And I thought that you're innocent until proven guilty.
Correct.
So,
Also,
so anybody can just file let's say somebody can file a charge against you.
libel against media.
Then automatically you're already disqualified.
Correct. For example, the permit to carry provision in RA 10591 is very prohibitive, very restrictive. We've challenged that as being subversive to the law, the kind of thing. And we've said, you know, the PNP, what they wanted to do under 10591 was to be able to inspect your firearms in your house without a search warrant.
So what is the status of that now? Can they still do that?
There's a TRO against it.
Oh.
So the Supreme Court has said until we're finished, don't do that first. We challenged the gun ban, the COMELEC gun ban last year during the elections. The COMELEC sidestepped us, so to speak, because what they said was you should allow us civilians to seek exemptions. What they did was they said, okay, no need to sue us. Here, go ahead and apply.
And they never approved.
They never approved. So I understand there's a barangay election coming up this year. So yeah, we'll probably challenge that again also.
Well, actually, during Miss Universe, I read in the newspapers that there were two cities, Pasay and Parañaque, that were gun ban.
You know, I'll tell you, George, that's part of it. The style of the executive here is that they will come down with a gun ban, good for 1 or 2 days. It's too soon to run to court. You know, so that's also what we're trying to challenge. You know, the matter of timing and. You know.
So aside from the drug crisis, criminality is still a big problem in the country.
Yes.
How can the current government administration strictly implement our laws on gun ownership? Kasi po, as we've mentioned earlier, marami po talagang may loose firearms dito sa bansa.
Well, it's a matter of enforcement, Rach. You have all the laws on paper, but if they're not being enforced, there's no point. It's just a matter of proper enforcement and accounting. In other words, you're the precinct commander of the PNP for this area. You should come up with an accomplishment report. And if you should have a quota, like in business. You're a manager, you have a quota. If you don't come up with it, meet the quota, you have to explain why. But I don't think that's being really observed in the PNP, and that's the problem. Lax enforcement.
Well, I think it's a little more complicated than that, because I know in certain areas of the country where the government actually doesn't even have checkpoints. It's
The
rebel
MILA.
groups or other
That's right. That's right.
or other separatist movements are the ones having the checkpoint. So this is something that they're aware of, and it's being what actions are being done to
George,
correct that.
good thing you've raised that. For example, these guys manning these illegal checkpoints, they're armed with firearms, so they're smuggled in from abroad. Well, who's stopping the smuggling? That's government's responsibility. I mean, out there on the beach in Mindanao, you have a small boat coming in with crates of firearms. That should be stopped.
But I think we also know that our Coast Guard, our police are either undermanned, they don't have the equipment to monitor all of these things. So in a way, I think that rather than focusing their resources on trying to process, by their own admission, 1% of the problem, they should try to focus on the bigger problem, which is the 99%.
Correct.
So if you were to ask me, the amount of effort it takes them to sustain keeping records of and renewing these every couple of years is really eating up into the resources of the government, rather than of the PNP in particular, rather than being able to try to run after the real criminals that are very evident wherever you look.
I'll tell you, George, by way of example, this Oplan Tokhang that was recently stopped, you have these drug suspects shooting it out, quote unquote, and they're found with firearms beside their dead bodies. No one has ever, that I'm aware of, no one has ever done an accounting of those firearms. This is a 38 caliber revolver, serial number 1234. They should be kept because, how do we know this not being recycled over and over? Best case of illegal firearms.
I read the news story saying that some of them had the same serial numbers and things like that, no?
That's right. It would be in the PNP's interest to do an accounting of those firearms because it would help clear the PNP's name of these accusations.
Well, we have 1 minute left in our program. Rod, would you like to say anything to our audience, particularly to our legal firearms license holders?
Yes. Well, thank you, George and Raish, for having me today. And as we said, of course, we have come a long way compared to 20 years ago when ownership was truly just a privilege. Now it is a right. But a right is not a right until it is asserted. That is a principle in law. So to all of us, gun owners and even members of society, we should continue to assert our rights in a legal way.
Okay. Thank you very much. At yan po ang isang makabuluhang diskusyon kasama si GOAC Vice President and General Counsel, Attorney Rod Moreno.
Maaari niyo po kaming i-follow at i-like sa aming Facebook page, Usapang Bayan. Ako po si Rach Marquez.
At ako po si George Chua. Samahan niyo po kami sa mga susunod ng nating mga episodes dito sa Usapang Bayan.